blessed to be the Team USA coach twice, and have been invited to coach the decathlon, heptathlon team at the Fort Cup in Germany this summer, so looking forward to that. Coached Division I for about 22 years, competed in Division II, and now this is my third season with Division III. So I've been, kind of across the gamut a little bit. Was blessed with one of my biggest honors being two-time South Region Coach of the Year, which is pretty awesome. We're up against the likes of Florida and Alabama and all those guys. And then Conference Coach of the Year multiple times. I've been just blessed to be able to coach athletes to all the major championship at the world level, which is a testament to them and their talent. Having worked with all different levels of athletes, you guys have the hardest job and are the best coaches because the most talented athletes, they pick up skill really easily. They got the speed, they got the power, so it's a lot easier coaching a really, really good athlete than it is a developmental athlete. So you guys are the champs with that. I love coaches education. I love being here, being able to share my knowledge, my experiences with you guys. Hopefully you can at least get one nugget out of this presentation that'll help you. That's what I look for when I'm going to the different clinics, but love being involved with coaches education, continuing education. I've written part of the sports sciences for the U.S. Track and Field College or Cross Country Coaches Association for their master level certification and help teach that. And I've done the World Athletics Coaches Education Program, the USA Track and Field, as well as the Coaches Association as well. So I've done a lot of coaches education. I'd love to continue to learn. It excites me and motivates me. I love to get in there and write training after I've learned some new things. And so hopefully I can put a little fuel on your passion as well today. And I'm not going to go through every name, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I've had many mentors who have invested their time in me and just really advanced my career and helped me be much more successful. And if you don't have mentors, I definitely encourage you to find some mentors that you can plug in with. It's just going to help you and help your athletes and everybody be more successful and have more fun. So topics that we'll cover today, it looks like a short list. Just talk about first what are shin splints. Then we'll go into the pathology of shin splints a little bit, treatment, and then most importantly, how to prevent shin splints. So what are shin splints? Shin splints is just a very generic term. There's no exact medical definition. It's a generic term for pain in the shins. So it's pretty simple. But for the most part, it's going to be the tibialis posterior, this muscle right here, which connects to the tibia. And as that's starting to tear away from the tibia is where you're going to get that pain. And most of your athletes are going to describe that pain right about here. So just below the middle of the shin is where that's usually occurring. With distance runners, usually if they have shin splints, or more frequently if they have shin splints, it's going to be the tibialis anterior, that green muscle which is on the front of your shin. And the same thing, it's going to be that muscle wanting to tear away from the bone a little bit. So that's essentially what shin splints are. So what's happening? The muscle, the tibialis posterior, connects to the tibia much the way the sail connects to the mast of a boat. So you can see this is a sail, it's a mast, they're feeding it in. It's a very thin connection, right? If you think about your Achilles tendon, that's a very thick, rope-like, strong tendon, whereas the tendon connecting the tibialis posterior to the shin bone is a very thin, much more like a sail. So it's a lot easier for it to tear away. So when the larger muscles, the gastrocnemius, your calf, your soleus, when those get fatigued from too much running or too much incorrect running, they're going to stop functioning as well, and then the tibialis posterior, those smaller muscles, are going to be trying to carry a load that they're not designed to handle. So that's essentially what is going to create that. The eccentric stress. So an eccentric contraction is when your muscle's contracting, but it's being forced to lengthen. Okay. So that's going to create tearing, micro tears, inflammation, create damage to that tibialis posterior muscle or the tibialis anterior muscle, depending on the situation, which is going to cause that to start tearing away from the bone, and then it can ultimately turn into stress fractures within the bone, but it's always starting with that soft tissue of the muscle there. So pronation, which would be dumping to the inside of your foot, is going to tear that up. So if we take a look at the tibialis posterior here, you'll see that it wraps down behind the medial malleolus, which is that bone on the inside of your ankle, that knob. It's going to wrap down behind that, and it's going to connect to the bottom of your foot. So the action of the muscle, when it contracts, it's going to cause your toes to point down, and it's going to cause your basically pushing off of your little toe. Okay, so this is the action that's going to happen in your foot when that muscle contracts. So if you're landing on your toes and your foot's dumping to the inside of your foot, that's going to be stretching and tearing that tibialis posterior. So that's going to create that eccentric stress. So we want to prevent dumping into pronation. Okay. The next one is just ankle collapse. So again, that tibialis posterior is going to cause you to be up on your toes. So if you're landing on your toes and your heel's being forced to the ground because of just power output, for whatever reason, heels being forced, that's again going to create that stretching and tearing within the muscles. So both pronation and ankle collapse are going to be the cause of the shin splints in that type of shin splint. So it's important to know, it's not important, it's a requirement. You have to know the cause and you have to treat the cause. If you treat the symptoms, you're just continuing to have the cause, right? How many people have had ice cups actually work and make shin splints go away? Nobody. So just a little anecdotal evidence there for you that treating the cause isn't going to do it. You got to, treating the symptom isn't going to do it. You got to find the cause and address the cause. As far as the tibialis anterior, more so from distance runners, when they're casting the foot out in front of their body and landing on the heel in this type of position, and then their toes slap to the ground, that's what's going to be tearing the tibialis anterior in the front of the shin. It could also be happening with a high jumper, right? The high jumper puts that foot out, the heel should strike first, or a javelin thrower, heel strikes first into a whole foot. That slapping of the toes into the ground, that collapse is going to be stretching that tibialis anterior as they're trying to contract it, creating these eccentric contractions, creating the micro tears, the inflammation, and that damage to the tibialis anterior. And if you have questions at any point in time, go ahead and just yell them out. If I'm losing my voice and you need me to use the microphone, let me know. Otherwise, I'll try to use my outdoor voice. So, taking a look at treatment. The one thing you'll see is there's many things up there, and there's no magic bullet. There's nothing that's just going to make them disappear. It's going to take time. It's going to take work. It's going to take a concerted effort to do that. But so, already talked. Treating the symptom does little to no good. You must treat the cause. The number one thing is running mechanics. And we're going to get pretty in-depth into running mechanics here. Poor running mechanics could be due to a lack of skill. They have poor mechanics. It could be due to a lack of strength to execute this skill correctly. So, for example, a sprinter is on the ground for 0.083 seconds. So you have 0.083 seconds to apply all the force that you need to in that stride. Okay? So you can be really strong in the squat rack, which is really slow, but if you are not strong in a short time period, you might lack the strength to be able to execute the skill correctly. If you can't apply the force in a short enough time, what are you going to do? You're going to increase the amount of time to apply the force. You're on the ground too long. So if you don't have that speed strength, if you will, you're going to be on the ground too long, and that's going to result in bad mechanics because you lack the correct type of strength. A misunderstanding of mechanics can be a big problem. Once you are at max velocity, can you run any faster? No.
No, it's max.
So, exactly. So, but a lot of athletes, they continue pushing backwards against the ground. Well, you can't run forward any faster if you're at max velocity. So the only thing that you're trying to do is basically maintain your speed and resist gravity. So for resisting gravity, we're trying to push down through the ground. So at max velocity running mechanics, our push should be vertical, trying to step down, pushing straight down through the ground. So if they have just a misconception, I'm trying to run that way to the finish line, so I'm pushing backwards to try and go that way. That misconception of mechanics and what they're supposed to be doing is going to cause them to have poor running mechanics. And then another one is reflexes, and I'll dive into that a little bit deeper. Another problem that could be a potential cause is frozen joints in the foot or in the ankle. And I just jump back a little bit here. You can see, we've got the cuboid, we've got the first, second, cuneiforms, we've got the navicular, the talus. So those are gliding joints. Of course, we have the metatarsal. Those are gliding joints. So there's supposed to be a little bit of movement gliding between them. And if those are frozen, they're not gliding, then your foot and your arch, it's designed to absorb a little bit of impact with every step. But if they're frozen and your foot's not kind of opening up a little bit with every impact, you're not absorbing the force correctly, or the foot's not absorbing the force correctly, transferring it all into the shin. So sometimes you might need a little bit of chiropractic assistance to get those joints moving correctly so that you can free that up and absorb force and transmit force the way it's designed to do. So frozen joints in the foot or in the ankle can be an issue. A treatment can be doing some ball rolling or some active release stretching, which I'll show you a video later on of that. You want to be sure that your footwear has not lost all of its cushion and support. The first thing that I ask when somebody says that they have shin splints is how old are your shoes, or I'll look at the bottom of their shoes, and when they're smooth, there's no traction left. That's the first thing that we need to fix, right? But being sure that the football hasn't lost all its cushion, as well as support to stabilize the foot in a supinated position, preventing it from dumping into pronation. And then, I always encourage athletes, everybody, when they get new shoes, to bleed them in. I've had a lot of athletes where their old shoes, they're just so shot, and then they go into this shoe that actually has structure, and now that's creating more pain and problem for them because there is so much structure that they're not used to. Their foot's not strong enough, it's not ready for that. So I'll tell them maybe it's an every other day, alternating your old shoes and your new shoes until you've kind of broken them in and just kind of, having a bleed-in process there. And it could be quite likely that, they need or will benefit from orthotics, and going and seeing a podiatrist and actually getting some orthotics prescribed can be very valuable. And it can also help because they can typically put those into their spikes where you don't have much of any support, and get some more support through having some orthotics. So take a look at ball rolling. Hopefully this will work. Minimize the show. Okay, so we'll use a lacrosse ball. Obviously, they have to kick their shoes off. Basically, this is just poor man's massage, right? You can go hire a masseuse if you want to massage your feet and your lower legs and make you feel great. Maybe go get a mani-pedi and get that all taken care of. But we'll, every day, pull out a lacrosse ball. If you have a lacrosse team at your school, they're very good at losing lacrosse balls and leaving them around the track. So it doesn't cost you a dime. But you can see right behind the tibia there, in that soft tissue is where you want to be rolling out. Rolling out the bone is just going to hurt. It's not good. You can't massage the bone. So you're trying to massage the tibialis posterior, which, like I said, connects to that, like a sail, to the back of the tibia. So you're just rolling back and forth in there. If the tissue is healthy, it won't hurt at all. If the tissue is unhealthy, it's going to light them up and they're going to be jumping. They should press in with enough force that it's uncomfortable, but it's not painful. Okay? If it's painful, then they're putting too much pressure there. So we're going to roll out both the bottom of the foot as well as the inside of the shin. Now, if you're a distance runner and you have shin splits in the tibialis anterior, then obviously you're going to roll the front of the shin rather than the inside of the shin. So that's a simple thing. I tell them do it 3 times a day. Do it for 1 minute on the bottom of the foot, 1 minute on the inside of the shin. So if you do both legs, that's 4 minutes. If you do that 3 times a day, 12 minutes. So I get on athletes pretty aggressively when they complain about shin splints, and I ask them if they've been ball rolling. They're like, well, I did 3 days ago. If you're not willing to invest 12 minutes a day into your health, you're telling me that you're not very committed, not very concerned. So it must not hurt that bad, or you don't care about being good. But that's basically what I'll prescribe them as far as the volume of ball rolling. And again, it should be mildly uncomfortable. If you're pushing in too hard and it's painful, then you're triggering kind of a trauma response, so that can be too much. Think about deep tissue massage. That's making you sore afterwards. It's not necessarily helping you recover. Let me see if I can reopen this here.
What does the ball rolling actually do, like physiologically?
It basically just relaxes the tissue. It relaxes the muscle, because if the muscle's tight, it's pulling against that bone 24 hours a day. So we're just trying to get that muscle to relax and just stop pulling against that bone and just relieve some of the tension on the tendon and on the bone there.
So would you consider that more of a treatment, or would you use it as kind of a preventative measure also?
Athletes that have had shin splints repetitively, I will have them do that before they get shin splints. So I'll use it as a prevention. And then it also gives them, because lots of times they won't even realize that their shin hurts when they're walking, when they're running, when they're jumping, but all of a sudden they ball roll, they're like, oh yeah, my shin's a little sore. So if they're doing that, and maybe before they have shin splints, they're doing it once a day or once every other day. But then if there starts to get any soreness right away, then they know, okay, I need to step up my recovery processes. So I use it both ways, both as prevention as well as treatment.
What if you don't have a lacrosse team? What other type of ball would work?
Well, I mean, I think you can buy a lacrosse ball from Walmart for like $2, but a tennis ball is a little bit soft. A golf ball is a little bit small, so it can go in deeper, which can be a benefit if they're pretty healthy. You know, the shins aren't very bad at all. They could use a golf ball and have a little bit of a deeper tissue massage, but if their shin splints are hurting, a golf ball is going to be too hard and too small, getting too deep. I've really found the lacrosse ball to be ideal because there's a little bit of softness to it, but the size is pretty good. Like I say, the tennis ball is okay, but it's a little bit too soft. Now, if your shins are really lit up, they're really hurting, then a tennis ball being softer is probably a good option. But again, you can buy them at a sports store or Walmart or whatever, pretty easy. Okay, so the number one thing that you have to, again, we have to fix the problem, right? We have to find the cause and address it, and almost always the problem is running mechanics. So if you want to treat the shin splints, you want them to go away, you have to fix the running mechanics. You can treat the symptom all you want, they're just not going to go away until the athlete has fixed their running mechanics. So there's multiple things that we're looking for here. And on the left side is what we don't want to look like. On the right side is a bit more what we do want to look like. But this person's probably going to have multiple shin splints, tibialis anterior and posterior, because you can see both the heel striking, toes are still up in the air, so they're striking the heel, they're striking in front of their body. This is going to cause them to run slower because they're putting the brakes on with every step as that foot hits in front of them. They're also in a very inelastic position. So speed is stride length multiplied by stride frequency. So if you want to run faster, you want to improve both those. You want more frequency and you want more stride length. If you are more elastic, your stride length automatically gets longer. So you automatically get faster. To have better elasticity, your pelvis needs to be in a neutral position. So when you have anterior tilt of the pelvis, you can see it real clearly through the t-shirt there, right? The hips are pointed down towards the ground. She is not in a elastic position. It's going to cost her stride length. So not only is it setting up injury, but it's also making her less efficient as a performer, and she's going to run slower. It's 10 times more important in the jumps. High jump, if I want to jump up, I better have my hips pointed up if I want to be able to go vertical. Long jump, if I want to be able to go up and out, I need to be keeping my pelvis neutral. Triple jump, you'll see it all the time. They run off the board, and they'll lose the posture of their hip pointing down, and they don't fix that in the next phase. And what's that next phase? It's about this long, and it's literally a step. Both feet are on the ground at the same time. That's purely because of the position of the pelvis. And if you want to fix a triple jumper, you want to fix their step phase, you need to fix probably the running mechanics and the approach, certainly the takeoff and that hop phase as far as fixing the pelvic alignment there. You'll see the foot's traveling way behind her, so because of the braking action on the front side, in order to not literally slow down, she has to push too far on the backside to regain the speed that she just gave away. So pushing far on the backside results in this high back kick, backsided butt kick mechanic going on here. So the heel's coming to the back of the butt rather than coming to the bottom of the butt. You can also see the plantar flexion here, so the toes pointed away from the knee, kind of like gymnasts frequently do. There's a reflex in your nervous system. If you flex a distal joint farther from the center of your body, the joint closer to the center of the body, the proximal joint, is also going to want to flex. So if I pull my toes up, I wasn't even thinking about it, my leg naturally goes forward a little bit. So if you want to increase your stride frequency, and you want to be able to take that next step faster, pull your toes up. You see a much more dorsiflex position here. That's going to create a reflex within your nervous system to bring the thigh forward, to flex the hip. So your thigh is going to recover sooner. It's going to recover faster, which is going to improve your stride frequency, which is going to make you faster, but it's also going to help keep you in better postures to prevent the shin splints. So you can see, although she strikes the heel, she's toeing the ground right here, pushing long back here. What you want to see with good running mechanics, and I think this is just valuable if you haven't seen it before, it can be great if you just video an athlete on your phone and then just show them just as you scroll through. We want to be stepping down. We want that shin to be vertical, not open here. We don't want this obtuse shin angle. We want to be stepping down with a nice vertical shin. You notice that's relatively tall and the knees are even. Okay, so if we have pretty good stride frequency, the knees are going to be even. If you have great stride frequency, world-class athletes, you're going to see this free knee is actually advanced past the support knee at the middle of ground contact. So that's something that you can be looking for. And then because we're pushing vertical to resist gravity, we're not pushing backwards, the knee should be slightly flexed when your toe leaves the ground, when you stop pushing against the ground. If your knee is totally straight, that means you're pushing backwards against the ground, okay? So that's gonna make you more squatty. It's gonna cost your pelvic alignment. It's gonna cost your shins and the foot striking against the ground. So good sprinting, whether it's on an approach runway or whether that's a 100-meter dash, there should be a little bit of flexion in that knee at toe up. Any questions on that, Al?
I got a question for you.
Yes.
How are the new shoes impacting foot plant and biomechanics? What you see now, and not, I'm not just talking spikes, I'm talking even trainers. Whereas there were much more or a wider variety of neutral plant trainers, they really are very, very few now. They tend to be more, I would say, semi-curve lasted or even straight lasted. And it prevents that foot, in some ways, from doing exactly that trampolining effect that you want. And so, how do we then, if we have athletes that are in these shoes, and some of them, what I'm finding is some of them are in the wrong shoes,
Right, absolutely.
and that has to be changed, and that helps. But then you see it traveling up, you're talking about hips and the biomechanics at the hips.
Right.
The same thing, they're trying to create force instead of at the ground with the hips. And many of them are very weak there.
Right, for sure.
What do we do?
Well, and I think that's where you have to educate the athlete on a little bit on running mechanics, but also what are the mechanics of the shoe and what is this specific shoe creating in your mechanics, and just educate them. Maybe you need to go away from that. Like use that to walk around school. They're cool looking shoes, but don't bring
Don't
them
wear
to
'em to
practice. Yeah, exactly. So one of the exercises that we do a lot of is dribbling. So this is kind of going from a dribble over the ankle to a dribble over the calf to a dribble over the knee. So just kind of showing the different amplitudes that we will do this at. We will do dribbling over the ankle. In my warm-ups, I basically eliminated the word jog. And I try to get them to dribble over the ankle when they're doing their jog. So it's a jogging pace, but trying to get them to practice good mechanics, right? There's no backside mechanics going on here, almost none. The toes are pulled up if you watch the dorsiflexion. The knee is lifting as she's stepping over the ankle or over the calf or over the knee. So we'll do it in warm-ups, we'll do it as a drill. We might do it with a weighted bar overhead to talk about posture and hip alignment and that type of stuff as we're doing that to enhance the vertical pushing. But you know, if we talk about speed development at the beginning of the year and you don't feel they're safe, you know, to run a 20-meter fly without pulling a hamstring or something like that, here's speed development right here. Or if you're doing a general training day, it's not a neuromuscular day, here's speed technique, right? Speed skill of you know, correct pushing angles, correct direction of force application to the ground. This gonna play? So this is going through it. I guess it's not going to repeat for me. So you can just see a little bit difference in speed. Now, what I want you to see with this is that when her body is moving a little bit slower, we should see a little different geometry of the foot recovery. So you're going to see a little bit more of a vertical foot recovery here. And you kind of see this oval. I know my hand just blocked your view. So it's kind of like an egg standing up, right? She's stepping over. It's a little bit of an oval path of the foot. Whereas if we're going to try and get the body moving a little bit faster, a little bit of velocity, now the foot pattern almost looks like an egg laying on its side, right? So it's still an oval, but you're going to have a little bit more horizontal movement as you start sprinting faster. So playing with shapes a little bit in the way you're doing this and the velocity that they're moving at can be a big difference. Now you still notice here, there's very, very little backside of mechanics. The foot is traveling just barely behind the center of mass at all. You see those toes pulled up, right? She's in a nice dorsiflex position, a nice stable ankle there. Correct force application of the track. You notice that the foot is, I mean, the shin is pretty vertical when she strikes the ground. She's stepping down into the ground. All right, and then same thing, just a bigger range of motion, just dribbling over the calf, which we're looking for those same qualities. I might have it later in the presentation, but in case I forgot to put it in there, when you strike the ground, you should be striking on the midfoot, the back of the ball of the foot. So right around here is where your main weight should be striking the ground. Now it's different if you're a long distance runner and you're running heel to toe or you're running whole foot, but as far as sprinters, jumpers, it's different obviously with a long jump takeoff or a high jump takeoff, but for the sprinting, basically that first row of spikes where there's 4 spikes that go all the way across the ball of the foot or whatever is where you should be striking the ground. So I have to be talking about this later, so I'm going to not talk about it entirely right now. Okay, some of these didn't automatically repeat for me.
Do you talk about them, when you're doing those, having the balls of their foot go over the ankle or calf, or do you talk about their heel going over the ball or the calf?
I'll do different things. Some athletes I'll cue, I want your right big toe to lift up as you step over. And I'll give them something very, very specific to dial in on. Other ones I'll just say, dorsiflex, and I'll educate them obviously what dorsiflexion is. Other ones I'll say, lift your toes. So it just kind of depends on the athlete and what cue works. And a cue, it gets stale. I mean, you use a cue for 3 or 4 weeks and then they're not really adapting that cue anymore. So you need to change cues. So having a variety of different things that you can say. And a lot of it's just them focusing.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it just, like you tell them and all of a sudden they do it, but then you see them 5 minutes later and they're not doing it again. So I think some of them just having to take accountability and responsibility for their own success, their own training, their own health. Let me see if this will play. That's disappointing. Well, at any rate, what this is a video, I guess you can kind of see it here. So she's hurdling, right? So if you look at, the knees are even in ground contact, look at the whole foot, she'd be a little bit more dorsiflex, but that's not bad, she's not totally plantar flex, but notice the heel is below the knee, just barely. So this is dribbling mechanics. We could pull up YouTube and look at any world-class, and she's not even that great of a hurdler, but you can look at any world-class hurdler, guy or girl, and they're typically going to be dribbling over the calf as they're sprinting between the hurdles because of how close the hurdles are together and how fast and powerful they are as athletes. They just run right into the next hurdle. I mean, they would crash it bad if they were to open up and have a full stride length. So the dribbling over the calf is essentially the mechanics that you're doing in quality hurdling. So it's not just a drill for speed development or for posture, for mechanics, that type of thing, but it's real. You're going to see it at the third to last step in the long jump and then the third to last step in the high jump and different things like that. So I just wanted you to kind of be able to see that it is actually an applied activity. So here's a little where I was getting ahead of myself. So we want to strike mid-foot. I will tell my athletes about the credit card rule. I should be able to slide a credit card flat underneath their heel and that's it. If I can stand a dime up on end or a quarter on end, then they're too high on their toes. And you can see, here's Christian Coleman, pretty darn good sprinter. You can see that whole foot contact. I'm blanking on his name, but also a world-class sprinter. He's like a 9'8" guy. But again, you can see that whole foot. You can maybe slide a credit card, and that's about it. So just kind of some proof for you, if you will, of world-class sprinters, and then they're not running on their toes. So that's one cue that the only time I'd ever even consider using it, if you have a severe heel striker that's a sprinter, I might tell them to run on their toes just as an over cue. But for the most part, I'm never going to use that cue because they're going to be way too high on their toes, which is going to promote shin splints. So I want to talk a little bit about max velocity mechanics first because we need to know where we're trying to get to. And then acceleration mechanics is how we get to those proper max velocity mechanics. So lots of times, sprint coaches, and I'll even do it sometimes, but you kind of break down whether it's a sprint or whether it's a long jump approach, we kind of break it down into different phases, the drive phase, the continuation phase, transition phase, whatever you want to call them. But essentially, there should be a uniform change every step of your acceleration. So the shin angles and torso angles should uniformly get more vertical, okay? The stride frequency is uniformly going to get faster, step by step. The stride length is uniformly going to get longer, step by step. So there should be this nice, smooth, uniform transition through acceleration. And then max velocity, obviously you can see the arrows, we're pushing down through the ground. This I stole from Vince Anderson, by the way, so I'm not trying to take credit for his drawing. But, depending on this is a pretty good athlete. If they can actually maintain some angles through 16 pushes, it's pretty darn good. I find it lots of times, more like 8 to 10 pushes, they might have some correct lean. Now they might fake it afterwards by bending at the hips, but we want to be having a nice power line where we have a straight line from our foot, through our shoulder, through our head even. So trying to push, and so you can use different cues like I need you to climb, I need you to run up the hill, I need you to push your hips taller, just whatever different cues, because you need to push your hips up to that vertical position, because we talked about we want to strike the ground underneath our body. We want to be stepping down, which means that we have to get tall. So if you haven't climbed during acceleration, you haven't gotten your hips tall during the acceleration phase, you're not going to be able to run the max velocity phase correctly. So teaching correct acceleration is it's crucial. You can maximally accelerate for about 4 seconds. So that's whether it's 16 strides or 25 to 30 meters. It's a lot of freshman girls, or if you're working with middle school, 4 seconds, they might only be 20 meters on the track. Some might be significantly less than this. So you're typically going to be acceleration for about 4 seconds, max velocity for about 3 seconds, and then deceleration thereafter. With the total strides, and this is a pretty good male, 42, I think is Usain Bolt, 48 would be a decent sprinter, but trying to push all the way through the race, but you're just changing your angle of force application. So instead of pushing, maybe 36 degrees for Usain, and then a 6-degree climb per step, you're going to be looking at getting to vertical and continuing to push through the ground, pushing all the way beyond the finish line, not stopping pushing and starting spinning. You're just pushing vertical rather than pushing backwards. So taking a look at those acceleration mechanics, pushing on the blocks, one thing that's a soapbox of mine, don't drag your toe. It works against the laws of physics. Friction does not make you faster, it makes you slower. So dragging your toes is going to slow you down. But you'll notice the parallel shin here. So there's low heel recovery, but it's not excessive to the point that it's dragging. The other thing that you know is that a longer lever is a slower lever. If I swing a pole vault pole, that's going to swing slower than if I swing a baseball bat. So if this foot is dragging the ground, you have a longer lever from the hip to the toe, which means it's going to be a slower movement of that leg. So if they want to be able to accelerate faster, there should be some folding of the knees, some lifting of the foot, and that's about perfect there when that shin is recovering about parallel to the ground. You'll notice that the chest is lifting. Here, I didn't chart it, but that's about a 45-degree angle. I think a lot of coaches might say that she's pushing too high, but world-class sprinter, so maybe she's doing it right. But you can see the shin is cocked back, right? Look at these nice lines, parallel line between the shins, the torso, this leg. So we got great parallel lines to attack back into the ground. And then looking at the mid-stance phase, again, the toe's not dragging, but it is a low heel recovery. One thing that you notice here is the rigidity of the ankle, okay? If you work on that with your athletes, teach them to be stiff. Sounds bad, right? We don't want them being stiff, but we want the joint, we want them to be able to stiffen the joints so they can use them elasticity, use the elasticity from them. So the rigidity of this ankle, she's going to get a lot more energy back from the track to project into that next stride. Whereas if the heel is collapsing, what are you doing? You're stretching, tearing that tibialis posterior, right? So you're creating all those eccentric strains. So if you watch acceleration or video acceleration, if you can't see it with the naked eye yet, watch, and are they keeping the ankle rigid or is the heel collapsing into the ground? That's going to be a huge cause of shin splints if they're collapsing, as well as just not getting the energy back from the track, right? We want that equal and opposite reaction sending us forward. So here's obviously a football player, a terrible example of acceleration. You can see he's bent over drastically at the waist. You see that the torso is nowhere near being parallel to that shin, so he's not pushing back through the ground very well. You can see he's hitting in front of the center of mass, even though he's at like step 2. So he's not actually pushing backwards at all. Lots of times this causes, in order to get your center of mass over the foot, and the same thing would be true of a track athlete, but if you're striking out like this, to get your center of mass over the foot, you almost have to let the ankle collapse. Otherwise, you're going to be braced and almost blocked behind that foot. So what would I tell him to do? I'd tell him to lift his chest. I'd tell him to post up. I'd tell him to push out taller. Any of those type of cues. So you need to be careful again of the cueing. If you're saying stay low out of the blocks, he was probably taught to stay low. You tell him to stay low, well, I'm low now, doesn't mean they're close to being incorrect acceleration mechanics. So allowing them to the freedom and perhaps telling them you need to push taller. I think it's important to understand the angle you can project at is dependent on your power levels. So the exact same athlete in the fall, barefoot on the grass that has some dew on it, is going to have less power than that same athlete in spikes on the track at the championship at the end of the season, right? So the same athlete is going to have to push taller in the fall, and they'll be able to push a little bit lower projection angle in the spring. And that's obviously going to change drastically if we're talking a brand new 7th grade girl coming out for track versus a senior boy who's been a 3-time state champion versus a professional athlete. So just recognizing, lots of times a well-meaning coach will come by and be like, she needs to push way lower. She's pushing out too tall. Well, if she can't hit power lines like you saw in the last one, if we're unable to hit these type of power lines, then we're pushing too flat. The other thing that you'll see is if you push too flat, you don't have enough air time, right? She's pushing both about equal vertical as she is horizontal. Okay, so a lot of people see this and they think horizontal pushing, but she's pushing about the same amount vertical. So it's important to recognize that even right from the beginning, we need some vertical push because that's going to create some flight time. The flight time allows enough time for this leg, the free leg, to recover and to be able to tack back into the track. If you push too flat and you don't give yourself any flight time, that's where lots of times you'll see the athletes start sidestepping because they're artificially creating more time to get their foot to the ground. So if you've got a real bad sidestepper, they may have played hockey too much, or they're probably just projecting at too low an angle and you need to tell them to post up a little bit higher. And this, I already touched about it, but you can see her angle of push is much higher than Usain's because he is way more powerful and faster. But even with that, you see great mechanics. I mean, look at the arms, are almost identical. The power lines, almost identical. Nice parallel shins. So they're both doing things perfect, but they're doing it perfect for them. Okay, so getting back into the treatment. So we need to fix running mechanics. First and foremost, top priority. Again, treating the symptoms does little to no good. We've got to treat the cause. The running mechanics could be, again, due to a lack of skill. It could be a lack of strength, right? If they're trying to project lower than they have the strength to do, it's going to create problems with the mechanics, which is going to create shin splints because of the collapsing of the ankle. A misunderstanding of the mechanics. If they don't understand that whole max velocity phase, I'm pushing down through the ground. I'm trying to push as tall as I can. I'm trying to strike on the midfoot. They might have a misunderstanding, thinking they're supposed to run on their toes because they heard that at some point in their life. So make sure that you are educating them so they're not misunderstanding mechanics. And then the stumble reflex. If you step off the curb and you don't realize the curb is there, what are you going to do? You're going to stick your foot out in front of you and you're going to reach with your toes to try and find the ground, right? So this is a reflex built in your nervous system. You can't fix it, you can't change it. The same type of thing is going to happen if I have forward rotation, and you'll see it with long jumpers, that type of thing, if they get messed up, but the same will happen with a sprinter. If I have not enough air time, I'm going to be unstable. If I'm unstable, it's like stepping off a curb. I'm unstable. Where's the ground? I need my stability. They're going to start reaching for the ground. They're going to have these grounding strategies, which is pointing the toes, stepping out in front of you to save their life. And you can't overcome reflexes. They're hardwired in. So you need to fix the cause of that reflex. So if they're pushing too low or they're too bent over, they got their head down, they're trying to drive, and this is creating some rotation with the system, and you see that shin casting open too much, you're not going to be able to fix it by telling them to keep their shin closed because it's a reflex. So you've got to get them to post up higher, you've got to fix the projection angles, that type of stuff, in order to overrule that reflex or stop stimulating that reflex, that stumble reflex. Treatment, weakness below the knees can be an issue, whether that's muscular or skeletal. And I think I'll talk about this more later, so I won't address it yet. Talked about frozen joints in the foot and ankle. Actually, I will go ahead and talk about weakness below the knees. So we talked about it. It starts as a soft tissue issue, but it can become a skeletal issue. So one thing that I do a lot of is stacking a lot of weight on my athletes. My distance athletes, and sometimes I'll have them just stand with, on a 45-pound plate with their heels hanging off, so half their foot's on the 45-pound plate. Put as much weight on your back, and you just stand there for a minute. But having that tension through the bones is going to stimulate the osteoblasts to create more bone mineral density. So if we don't overload them, right, just a general principle of training theory, we need the principle of overload. So we have to overload the system if we want to increase bone mineral density. If we want stronger bones in our shins, we got to overload that. So we'll go pretty heavy with everybody. We definitely go heavy, but it's, even the distance runners. I mean, 6-inch step ups, quarter squats, calf extensions. I mean, we'll load them a lot heavier than they want to go or think that they can go. For the sake of strengthening those bones. Strengthening the muscles in those lower legs. I'm going to talk more about that and show some videos coming up here, so I won't do that at the moment. And then frozen joints in the ankle and foot. So I already kind of talked about those should be gliding. And if they're not gliding properly, they're not going to absorb the forces and transmit the forces correctly. So there are a couple of pretty simple chiropractic adjustments you can do if you're not afraid of being sued. I'm maybe stupid. I do them for my athletes. So if you want to know that, I can show you that. Real simple. I can show you that afterwards. But you can also just start massaging the foot and just, you have to kind of visualize. Maybe you need to go to your training room and grab a skeleton foot so you can see where those bones are. But just try to, start to get those bones to glide across each other and see if you can feel if they're frozen. Now, I know that's more time than basically any of us have, but if you have a superstar athlete and you're down to 3 athletes at the state meet, maybe you have the time to do it for them at that time.
The massage guns work really well.
Yeah, massage gun absolutely is definitely helpful, on that plantar fascia and everything. But just trying to get those bones to glide, make sure that they're moving correctly, or send them to a chiropractor. Lots of times that talus is jammed up, so the talus sits right here between the tibia and fibula. So lots of times just all the impact we have, especially a jumper, a lot of impact on that takeoff leg. This is kind of like a triangle or a pyramid, and it'll push up and push those bones apart. Well, if these bones get pushed apart, the opposite end is going to get pushed together. So now the tib-fib joint up here, this little knob on the outside of your knee there, that's not going to be gliding properly. And then that can send problems. You can start having groin pulls, all kinds of issues from that as it just travels up the chain. So making sure that, and you can see also like where this connects to the bottom of these bones, the cuneiforms and cuboids and everything. So if those are frozen or aren't moving, well now this isn't moving the way it should as well. So just making sure that you have health there. So again, potentially seeing a podiatrist if they're having any problems, or a chiropractor who's good with feet and is willing to adjust feet. Some of them only crack backs. So make sure you're going to the right chiro to get you taken care of. So looking at some prevention. Again, the first and foremost thing that you have to do is teach and rehearse correct running mechanics. Part of that is proper training. Make sure so kind of a few points down there. I put prescribe appropriate volumes that can be run correctly. So if we're hitting them too hard, too much volume in the fall, and their mechanics are falling apart because they're just too fatigued, too exhausted, we are setting up shin splints for them. So we need to make sure that we're dialing correct volume. So if you need more volume, go to Plan B. I start the fall with a lot of circuit training. We're doing a lot of side shuffles, cariokas, backwards runs, forward dribbles. You can alternate that with a general weight circuit, a body weight circuit, which could be push-ups, sit-ups. So you can be going back and forth with the locomotive action as well as the in-place exercises, and you can get them breathing real hard. You can get that lactate stimulus, get that endocrine system going, get that growth hormone boost. So you can get the volume that you need in a safe way without having to run so much that the mechanics are breaking down and they're developing bad habits and setting up shin splints. So take a look at that. So way to prevent it is strengthening the muscles and the bones below the knee. So I talked about strengthening the bones, right? We got to put load on them for them to get stronger. But we'll do a lot of barefoot work. We'll do a lot of barefoot jumps in the sand, different pogos and different combinations in the sand. We'll do calf extensions in the weight room. And then the spinal loading, which I mentioned, to strengthen the skeletal system. And we'll do a lot of ankle mobility. So if you look at the picture of the bottom there, in the fall I do a ton of deep squatting. Best thing I've done. And I do it largely for my sprinters, and I'll have them hold. I mean, I have everybody do it, but I love it for the sprinters because they got to come out of blocks, right? That's a pretty similar position. If they roll forward and put their hands in the ground, you got your block start right there, pretty darn close. So I like to get that strength. You have 6 muscles in your hips that don't get worked until you get below parallel. So if you're never going below parallel in your squats, then you're going to have the obturners, the gemelli, the piriformis that are not going to be getting trained, at least not in the squat. If you're doing some lateral movements, some rotational movements, you might get them through another way, but you're going to be missing them otherwise. So we'll do a lot of deep squatting there, but look at where the knees are out in front of the toes, and you have the heels still on the ground. So you're developing a whole bunch of ankle mobility, and as you have more ankle mobility, you have better proprioception. You're going to be much more resilient to injury and forces and all that type of stuff. So we will definitely do deep squatting. And then just for strength, obviously we want to progress. This is going to be getting a lot of tissue. You're going to get some huge testosterone boosts from this, just because you're working so much tissue. But it's also going to be hammering the nervous system a bit more. So as the season goes on and you're not trying to invest all of your neural energy in the weight room, we're going to go up to higher positions. Now obviously you can stack on more weight, which is going to be more applicable to max velocity, that type of thing. And those joint angles are going to be more specific, but you're not tearing into that muscle tissue or as much muscle tissue. So you're not going to have nearly as much residual fatigue from those higher positions than if you're doing those deep full squats. But yeah, go ahead.
So when you have somebody, because we have a bunch of them who are kind of short and they can really go that low, how do you process that? You still want to go low,
Yeah, they
but
can't
you
go that low.
you want them to keep their full foot on the ground.
Yes,
For sure.
yes.
So what do you do?
I make them do it.
No, but I mean they can't.
I make them go as deep as they can,
Okay.
and then lots of times they can go deeper than they think
I
they
know.
can, deeper than they say they can. But I think that's one thing, and sorry if I offend any strength and conditioning coaches out here, but I've seen a lot of strength and conditioning coaches where they spend all fall, and I'm talking about a collegiate setting, so your whole prep period, they're spending doing bungee work and all this goofy stuff, and then now when our season starts, they're like, okay, now they're ready to squat. Well, it's too late. We can't be squatting now. You're trying to tear all their hamstrings. So like, even if they're not able to do it right, though I want to, I'm gonna adapt the range of motion so that they can do it right, and then I'm gonna make them increase that range of motion every day, ideally. Every session we go in there, and that's where the weight is valuable, because sometimes having that weight kind of pushes you down and forces a little bit of that ankle mobility to open that up. But I'll start stupid light. I mean, I might start with a broomstick or an empty bar, but like sometimes a broomstick's not enough. Sometimes you're a little more resistant to push them down. So an empty barbell can be
Are you
very.
okay if there's a lot of kids that have problems keeping their heels up, are you okay with feet?
Yeah, the feet should flare out just a little bit. The toes should be out a little bit, but I tell them I want your hips or your feet underneath your hips. If I tell them underneath their shoulders, man, some of them think they got some big shoulders. So I tell them feet underneath your hips, toes should be flared out a little bit, and then they should be able to keep the foot on the ground. I'll tell them if this old man can do it, there's no reason you can't do it. Sometimes you need to develop them, into it. But yeah, I don't really accept no for an answer. And again, I'm not going to do something to injure them. I'm not going to make them go deeper than they can do correctly. If they're, laying their chest on their quads here or whatever, like I'm going to fix that right away. But I will, I'll just swat. And the best way to get good at something is by doing it, right? Any other questions on that at all? Proper training. And then, another big thing with preventing shin splints is making sure that you're training all 5 basic biomotor abilities. So they're often referred to as the 5 S's: strength, stamina, skill, suppleness, and I usually say them faster: strength, stamina, skill, suppleness, and speed. Thank you. How can I be forgetting speed? So you want to be addressing all of those all times of the year. You're just going to change what is the priority order, what is the volume of each of those, what's the density of each of those. But you want to make sure that you're training all of those so that your athlete is a well-rounded athlete. I was a pole vaulter, but I get on pole vaulters, I call them, the evil event. But, lots of times they just want to go and work skill every session. Like, coach, somebody work skill. Or sometimes throwers. I'm just going to work skill. I'm just going to throw every day, all day. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to do any strength work. I'm not going to do any speed work. I just want to work the skill. And unfortunately, in my program, that's where I have some athletes leave because it's not fun enough for them. But I think winning's fun, and I think staying healthy is fun, and I think long-term development is fun. But I think it's important to recognize that if they want to fulfill their potential as an athlete, we we can't just train skill, we can't just do the fun stuff, we gotta do the strength, and we gotta do the stamina, we gotta do the suppleness, which obviously the suppleness is crucial, that range of motion work, you know, to prevent injury. So here, I can get this to go. Okay, so here is some barefoot work in the sand. So we're just developing a little coordination, right? A little bit of rhythm maybe, but just toes out, toes in, you know, heels out, heels in. And then, so the hips are gonna be burning because they're using the piriformis and those external rotators in the hip. And then dribbling a lap around the sand. And then she's gonna repeat that 4 times. And then we'll do toe pulls. So she's not jumping or pogoing, she's trying to use only her toes to pull her body forward. You can see you start getting dug in a little bit of the hole and you gotta step out back on top of the sand, but we'll do that and then we'll dribble over the ankle, a lap around the sand, and we'll repeat that 4 times. So we'll do 4 times the toes out, heels in, toes in a lap, and we'll do 4 sets of that, and then 4 sets of 10 toe pulls and a lap, and that's just one of our cool downs we call sand drills. Let's see what the next one is. Okay, so this is one of our jumping series. I think this is Athens, so she's just doing pogos in place. Notice the toes get pulled up every time she leaves the ground. So she is toeing off the ground, right? But the toes are getting pulled up, so she's dorsiflexing in the air. She's landing on that mid-foot position. So we have in-place pogos, we do forward pogos, we do side-to-side over a cone, over a shoe, whatever. Here's the forward pogos. Oh, with the straddle was the previous one, pogoing with a straddle of the legs. A zigzag forward pogo, and then she'll do a backwards pogo. I told her to get moving, she's going in place too much. And then a backwards zigzag pogo. And you can see this is in the summer, so this is coming into the fall for us. So for you guys, could be, during basketball season, whatever that is. Like, hey, start, you have shin splints, start doing this stuff now. Now, you gotta figure out where am I gonna get sand in the winter, right?
Yeah.
So that might be the tricky thing. But ideally, you'd be doing this stuff before the general prep phase, before you've even begun your general training. You're doing this stuff to keep them healthy in the first place, or to do that preventative work. Because once you have the shin splints, it almost just takes rest to make them go away. Like if you magically fix the running mechanics that quickly, they might go away, but largely in time.
Could you use a foam mat with
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
So like a wrestling mat would
Wrestling mat would be a
be
great
somewhat
option.
close to that.
That'd be perfect. Yep. The sand is better because it's gonna form your foot, or you're landing on uneven areas. So you're developing a little bit of ankle strengthening with it. You're developing some proprioception with it. So I like the sand better. It's a little bit softer, which means less impact on the tibia, on the skeletal system. But we will progress from this to AstroTurf to the track with these different pogo type of activities. So we'll just kind of bleed them in there. But the first year I got there, this is my 3rd season, but it's been like 2.5 years that I've been there. And I started in September, and about 80% of the athletes had shin splints. And so I wasn't there to give them this summer training, right? This pre-season training. But I implemented the next year, and we dropped down to about 10% of the athletes having shin splints just in one season of just implementing this type of stuff. The barefoot work is part of the cool down, the pogo work. So the other thing to understand is the Achilles tendon works like a rubber band. Most of your tendons work like a rubber band. So you stretch them and they're going to snap back for you. Because that's the way they work, that's also the way they adapt. So if you want to get good adaptation, you want to be using stretch shortening cycles, stretch reflexes, those type of things, which is a big reason that we're doing the pogos. We're jumping to prevent shin splints because that's the way those tissues adapt. They're going to respond the best when you're loading them elastically. Like I said, they're going to respond the best. They're going to adapt the best. So we do some, heavy calf extensions in the weight room. We'll do some eccentric where they're slowly controlling it down into a stretch position for about 4 seconds on the way down, and then they use 2 legs to push up, and 4 seconds. So we're doing those elastics or eccentrics to lay more, tissue, more tendon. But the best way to train them is right there with the different poses, the different jumps, the elastic energy there. The other thing that I'll touch on is, somebody had mentioned hips a little bit. And the hip strength is a big thing as far as obviously posture. It's going to affect running mechanics. It's going to prevent injuries. So going below parallel with those deep squats really works those hips. Like I said, the gemella, the abturator, the piriformis. I had a girl who couldn't run. She had to just not compete during the outdoor season because her knees were so bad. The first year I got there, we implemented the full range of motion, the deep squats over that summer training, and she was in there doing them. And she came back and had 0 knee pain the next year. Competed great, but just, I love seeing, the relief that she had. Like, it was unbelievable to her because her knees had hurt for years and years, and it's just, her hips were too weak. So then, it's traveling down the chain in that case because of the weak hips causing her knees to hurt. But a lot of times it's traveling up the chain, specifically with shin splints, it's usually always going to be traveling up the chain from the ground. Let's see what the next one is. What time are we supposed to be done at? 2? All right, I think I got 2 minutes. I think I can get through this for you guys. Okay, so another method of prevention of shin splints is taking a look at the nutrition. Okay, I had an athlete, I kid you not, she would eat an entire sheet cake on her own. Like, she had so many simple carbs, it was horrible. But she had like 21 stress fractures in her shin. Having a real high glycemic carbohydrate diet creates all kinds of catabolic processes. Catabolic is breaking down tissues, creates all kinds of catabolic processes within the body, and is just going to set you up for injury. So, taking a look at the nutrition, making sure, obviously we need carbs, but we want more low glycemic carbs, which is going to be your fruits and your vegetables and your grains and that type of thing. I always encourage my athletes, as possible, try to eat a diet that's about 40% carbohydrate, about 30% protein, and about 30% healthy fats. That can be a little bit challenging to get, but if they do that, they will feel so much better. They will recover from training much better. It creates a much more anabolic hormonal situation, endocrine situation within their body. And then taking a look at blood glucose levels, again, kind of going back to the high glycemic carbs. If your blood sugars are shooting up, you're going to release a lot more prostaglandins, which is an inflammatory response, what do we do if we have shin splints? We take ibuprofen because we want that pain to go, we want the inflammation to go down. Well, that's an NSAID, right? Ibuprofen is an NSAID to counteract the inflammatory response, which is triggered by the prostaglandins. Well, let's go to the source and eliminate the prostaglandins by having a healthier diet, right? By getting rid of some of those simple carbs and not having these fluctuations of our blood sugar like we're diabetic, but eating like a healthy diabetic and keeping steady blood sugars is going to help control your endocrine situation, which is going to help drastically in how you recover from training and prevention of injury and prevention of these inflammatory responses that we don't want. So some supplements that they could possibly look at: omega-3s, fatty acids. The American diet's very low in them. We tend to be very high in trans fats and saturated fats and omega-6s. But supplementing omega-3s can be very valuable, especially if they don't like eating fish. If you like fish, load up on your sockeye salmon and go to town. That's going to be even better for you. But getting those, obviously having calcium, making sure that we have plenty of the substrate that we need for our bone mineral density. Vitamin D is specifically needed to promote bone growth. Glutamine they did studies on people doing surgeries when they're cutting through tissues, and glutamine is one of the things that help them recover the fastest, because as you're breaking down muscle, even if that's just from a lack of diet, a lack of nutrition, glutamine is the #1 amino acid that's released from the muscle. So supplementing glutamine can help prevent the breakdown of muscle, which if you have less breakdown, you recover faster and you have less wear and tear on your body. And then just proteins in general, right? Some people don't want to eat meats or whatever, or it's a great fad to go on a vegan diet and they have no idea how to do it knowledge-wise. So they're missing all their proteins, and then they do it for about 3 weeks until they feel so garbage that they switch back and start eating some real food again, or the rest of the food, I should say. But so making sure that our athletes are getting the proteins in there. And then, just a reality of the situation is body count. you have about 4 times your body weight coming down. If you have a sprinter run across a forest platform, you got about 4 times your body weight coming down. A triple jumper has about 10 times their body weight coming down each phase. So, you know, a triple jumper, if you're 5 pounds heavier, 5 pounds overweight, that's another 50 pounds of impact every single triple jump phase that you take. So taking a look at body comp, and obviously we need to be very sensitive about how we're addressing that, or if we're even addressing it. There's some situations where if you want to stay employed, you don't address it. But if you have an athlete who is mature enough to handle an honest conversation, and they need the conversation, that's something that sometimes you need to take a look at. Another aspect of prevention is restoration, right? So I've talked about this all through my presentations, but we have our super compensation curve. We stress the system, we overload the system, we give it rest, and it super compensates to a higher level. So if we overload it, we talked about doing too much running where the mechanics are breaking down or getting sloppy because we want to have our big fall base or our big start of the season base, whatever that is. You know, we can overload them and then they never super compensate at all. They get injured and they got shin splints and everything. One thing that's worth pointing out is the yellow line here. If you undertrain them, they still super compensate, just not as high. But you're always better off to undertrain them than overtrain them, because overtrain them, they're not going to have that super comp at all. The other thing that's important to realize with that is when you get better, not during the work phase. You get worse during the work phase. You're tired, you're fatigued, you're sore, you're tight. You get better during the recovery phase. So it's equally important to plan recovery into your training as it is the actual training. So really important with that. And then obviously we want to have the right dosage with sufficient recovery, which is going to give you the green line with the highest peak, the highest super compensation, the best results, best return on investment. So a couple of key takeaways. Treating the symptom does little to no good. You must find the cause and address the cause. To eliminate shin splints, one must have good running mechanics and sufficient lower leg / foot strength. To keep the tissues healthy through proper training design, volumes, and therapy as needed. Educate your athletes on the importance and the how-to of nutrition. So maybe you don't talk about body count, but maybe you just talk to them about, hey, this is going to improve your endocrine profile, it's going to improve your hormones, you're going to feel better, you're going to recover better. And lots of times if they just start doing it for those reasons, the body comp will take care of itself. And then, again, don't skimp on providing your athletes rest and recovery, because that's when they get better. And there's my email. So if you have any questions right now, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, if you want to shoot me a question another time.
How much do you talk to them about sleep at night? Because when you're talking about all these things, now I'm very annoying with that. So
Sleep, so I'd say sleep is number one. I had a friend look at this and they forgot to point that out to me, and I forgot that. I say sleep is number one. I've seen studies where if you have 6 hours or less sleep a night, you're like 4 times more likely to get injured. So I talk, especially the college athletes, right? Like it's bad. So I talk to them about it all the time. A lot of them say, yes, coach, and they walk away, and then they come in with bedhead the next practice at 2 p.m. because they're up till 4 a.m. But yeah, sleep, I think sleep is more important than nutrition. Now, nutrition is hugely valuable. You can see how it's going to affect the endocrine system, but sleep does too. You know, you're going to have more growth. Your highest growth hormone levels are going to hit in the evening before midnight. So if they're not going to bed till 2 a.m., they missed a huge opportunity, you know, of the endocrine system. So sleep is huge. All right, thanks.